In this video, we will share the 5 books we recommend you read before getting married.
Stick around to the end because we'll share our... Stick around to the end because the 5th one will be our hands down favorite book. Yay!
Right, we did it! I'm Christian, this is my wife Brigid. We've been married for a year and a half now.
Whoop whoop!
And one thing we noticed in preparing for marriage is how easy it is to prepare for the one day, the 24 hours of the wedding day, and not prepare for the rest of your life as a married couple.
My dad always said while we were preparing to get married, you're not getting weddinged, you're getting married.
So hopefully these book recommendations will help you and your partner get ready for the rest of your life and not just the one wedding day.
Yeah. So Christian, what's our first book?
So.
Is this no?
Oh yeah. Wait, I want to say one more thing. If you are engaged and preparing for marriage, you're in the right place. Share this with your fiance. If you're not, that's totally okay. You should watch this video. But after this, you should watch a video we'll have linked down in the description we made on discerning your vocation. We're by no means experts, but we just put our thoughts there. And if you are married, you should definitely still watch this video. Especially the 5th book that we're going to share at the end is great for married couples. The first book we have to recommend you is The Good News About Sex and Marriage by Christopher West. And what I really like about this book is it gets into the basics of theology of the body and the meaning behind marriage. Marriage is good, but often in our society it is broken. And we get a lot of incomplete images of marriage. But the ultimate image of marriage is Christ in the church. And marriage is the first way God chose to reveal himself to us in Adam and Eve. Yet after the fall, there's been some incompleteness. But this is about bringing it back to the source, which is God's love, which all marriage should be modeled around his love.
I also love this book because it's simple, to the point, and it's kind of all those questions you might be scared to ask. You might be scared to say out loud at first. You can look it up in this book, and it's clear cut, to the point. You won't be left asking more. Well, maybe you'll have more questions.
Yeah, the basic structure is question and answer. So certain questions about what do I do before I do? So in preparing for marriage, but there's one section that says I doing it, which is all about sex and intimacy in marriage. It's all about those topics that you might have a lot of questions on, which we won't get into, but you can read this book if you have specific questions on the Catholic Church's teaching on intimacy, relationships, and whatnot. Mm-hmm. All right, Brigid, what is our second book?
Our second book is kind of in a different realm. It's 3 to Get Married by Venerable Fulton Sheen.
Which we do not have because we shared it with my sister, who is preparing for marriage. So we put our money where our mouth is.
We love this book because it shows that other aspect of marriage, the metaphysical realm. Fulton Sheen just takes you through so beautifully what marriage really is, what it means to be loved by God and love your spouse out of that. And it's just like, yeah, makes you think in a way that these other books maybe can't.
One verse we used for our wedding readings is, we love because he first loved us. And that's what the book gets into. We have to share love, but not from our own strength, but because we have received Christ's love first. So that's why it takes 3 to get married, because our marriage will be built on God and built on his love.
Yeah, and one last point about that book is it talks about the 3 tensions of marriage and how marriage is never going to be perfect here on earth, and that we're continuing to strive for unity with our spouse, but we're never quite going to experience it fully here on earth, to continue to look towards heaven.
Marriage is a sacrament which points towards heaven, points towards ultimate fulfillment, union with God. So it's a journey. It's never going to be perfect on this earth. So that's a great perspective to have going into marriage. The next book we have is Love and Responsibility by Karol Wojtyła.
JP2!
JP2, who is a saint. And this is before he was Pope, before all of that. And it's really...
You should probably say who he is, actually.
Pope John Paul II. Look him up if you don't know him. But this is an even more philosophical and probably heavier read, which I'd recommend to you if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the human person, of virtue, of what it means to be free, and yeah, if you're just like a nerd. So this is what I would recommend. One quote he says is, "Freedom is not an end in itself, but the end of freedom is love." And this is what vocation is about. It's about building ourselves up to be free, but then giving that freedom away to something else, to someone else, really, to your spouse if you're called to marriage, and giving that freedom to God and the church if you're called to religious life or the priesthood. Anything else?
Nope.
All right, check it out. This is your quick answers, and this is more of your deep dive.
This might be where this guy, Christopher West, got his answers. He looked at JP2. He was like, what's it all about?
JP2 is the foundation of most of these books that we're sharing. Brigid, what is our next book? Our fourth book
is more of a story. It's A Severe Mercy by Sheldon Van Auken. Shelton Van Auken? I don't actually know if it's Sheldon or Shelton.
I don't know.
This book I found to be so inspiring and so beautiful as I was preparing for marriage. I remember looking through it, and you read about this couple, Sheldon and his wife, and how beautiful their marriage was and how sacrificial they were for each other. But really, as they go through their life, how they continually grow to be more and more in the image of the Trinity versus just the marriage between them two, that they really start to image God. And this story, it just takes you through really heartbreak, a very, very sad ending, but that is filled with hope. We won't tell you what happens. If it's filled with hope, and it gives you this hope of no matter what happens in my marriage, the purpose is to bring my spouse to heaven, to continually strive for heaven, and to never settle for just what's here on earth.
And they were friends with C.S. Lewis, right?
Oh yeah, and so one other thing is that C.S. Lewis has his letters all throughout this book, because him and Sheldon were friends and would write to each other regularly about their life, their love, their experiences. So that's another highlight of the book.
All right, we're going to give a quick couple shout outs and honorable mentions, and then we'll get to the final book, which is our hands down favorite for preparing for marriage. Brigid, what are a couple shout outs we have?
Yes. One is the book Holy Sex. An interesting read, something that you can use especially to spur conversation between you and your spouse, to be read probably right before you got married, just really preparing for your marriage relatively soon.
It's similar to this, but
goes
just
a little more
way
in-depth.
deeper dive.
Yeah.
Our other shout out that didn't quite make the list is Wild at Heart. Great book, not specifically catered towards marriage, but it's about masculinity, manhood, all that stuff, which is really important for the man to understand, but also the woman. The man is wild at heart. And this is by John Eldridge. Yeah,
and we love this book. It's super good read. It's actually super easy to read if you're looking for an easy book. And it leaves you kind of asking more questions. It's not all the answers. We're not going to say it's like 100% this is what man is, but it just inspires so many thoughts, so many questions, and lots of conversation.
Yeah, marriage is about living out your masculinity and femininity for each other. And just diving into that, and obviously it's a lifetime of learning that, which we're still in the process of. We're very new at this. So, without further ado, drum roll please. Our hands down favorite book is called Be Devoted by Dr. Bob Schuchts. And if you don't know this guy, he is a legend. He's written many books. He's a Catholic psychologist.
At least 5.
At least 5, yeah. So check him out. But Be Devoted is his one specifically on marriage and preparing for marriage and rekindling the love of married couples. And the whole book is rooted in the 5 levels of unity that he goes over. And I have them written down just so I didn't forget them. But they build on each other. So the first level of unity he talks about is spiritual unity, and then emotional intimacy, daily companionship, cooperative teamwork, and at the very top is sexual fulfillment. And what I found interesting about this order, what we found interesting, is the foundation is spiritual. Sharing spirituality, praying together, having that mindset of God is our rock. That is the foundation, the foundational unity of marriage, which I think most of society, when you're preparing for marriage, they see that as just an optional thing. Your spirituality is kind of on your own. It's in your separate corner. If you can have it the same as your spouse, great. Or like, don't bring it into marriage. Don't bring religion in marriage, right?
Yes.
But it's the foundational point, and without having a marriage built on God, it is sure to fall. The 4 bottom ones build to sexual fulfillment, which is the pinnacle, which flows from the other unities. And this is also the opposite of what the world will tell you, because most relationships in the world just start with the physical attraction, often premarital sex, all these different types of things, when really true fulfillment in that area comes from living out the other 4 unities.
Yeah, and you actually find through reading this book and through just like experience too of like the sexual fulfillment doesn't even make sense without the first 4. And that's really why it just is pointing to marriage as this opportunity to build these intimacies with your spouse and to have that intimacy with them eventually.
Yeah. And you can build those other intimacies while preparing for marriage in some capacity, which is really cool.
And one thing I love about Dr. Bob Schuchts in this book is that he was married, but actually before he wrote this book, his wife passed away.
Yeah.
And so he writes out of his loss and out of his experience of marriage and like looking back on it. He has this beautiful, beautiful wisdom to share.
Right. And seeing how marriage has brought him closer to God and how it ultimately leads to true fulfillment in heaven. And another thing I love about this book and all of his books is they have this sort of, after each chapter, a couple questions that you can go over with your partner, with your fiance, with your spouse if you're married, and just really bring some great conversation starters, which we went over. We were able to read it, journal. I did some journaling, then we came together, talked about a bunch of things. And it even has some activities to do to build these levels of intimacy.
Like staring into each other's eyes for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes. It's very interesting. That's all we have for you today. So thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Share it with someone. Share it with your fiance. Subscribe because we'll be making more content. Let us know what you thought. You have anything to say?
Thanks so much for being here. Marriage is awesome.
We recommend. We filmed this whole video while our kid was sleeping. He's 6 months old. So he didn't wake up. That's a miracle. All right. Until next time. See you guys.